welcome back to the yellow dresser. This video was originally an hour and 36 minutes long, and I split it into 3 separate videos because I realized that that video was probably way too long. But if you do want to watch the original video, it is still on my YouTube channel and you can check it out. But until then, you are in the 3rd and final part of my Making My Miami Dress playlist. So this one is how I constructed it, so I hope you enjoy how I pieced together all the pattern pieces that I made, and you get to learn some fun sewing techniques. So stay tuned and thank you for watching. Alright, so what we're going to do first is we are going to hem my skirts, attach the ruffles to the over skirt, and then baste them together. So in order to do that, the hem on this circle skirt, this is the easiest, and I am telling you, this is the easiest way to do a hem on a circle skirt. So what we're going to do is you're going to either need your lining fabric or you're going to need your base fabric. For the circle skirt, we're going to be cutting some more bias tape. So I am using my muslin and I folded it at the 45-degree angle, just like we did when we cut out the waistband, except instead of cutting it across, we are cutting right along the edge of that fold. This was the fold of the 45-degree angle that was folded like this, and I cut it off. So I've been lining up my ruler for as long as the bias tape that I need, and I just cut along. Alright, once you have your bias tape, you're going to sew them at different angles. So you guys see how these are angled the same direction? You want to be able to have a nice, clean, straight bias tape. And if you were to sew them at the same angle, you would have an angled bias tape. So how you do that? You're going to face them opposite directions, so the points are connected like this. So it's going to look like this. See how instead of the same direction laying flat, I open it up, lay it across the top, and then you're going to stitch there to create the one perfectly seamless bias tape. Alright, so once you have your bias tape all sewn together, I'll show you what it looks like. So my seam, let me see if I can focus it. My seam is right here. So you can see that it's sewn at an angle. So it's gonna look like you're sewing it at a 90-degree angle, but you're not. When you open it up, it'll be a nice straight hem. Once you get that done, you're gonna wanna press it. You can press it to the side or you can press it open. It doesn't particularly matter for this. If you are working with lighter fabric, I would suggest pressing it open, but you can do it either way. Alright. Once you have it all done and all pressed and put together, you can go ahead and serge it. So if you do not have a serger, you cannot finish this seam using a machine, I would suggest that you roll hem it. So you would take it down, fold it twice, and stitch it down because you want this edge to be finished. So if you don't have a serger, again, you can do that, or you can use pinking shears. Pinking shears are the zigzag scissors, so you would just sew a line where you would want to cut off for the pinking shears, and then you would just cut. So once you have your bias tape all serged or you roll hemmed it, it is time to start assembling the first layer of the skirt. It's time to start assembling the first layer of the skirt. What you're going to do, you're going to put your right sides together, so your fabric, your outside of your fabric is on the inside. Piece them together, and you're going to want to leave some space for either a zipper or buttons or however you choose to close up your dress. I'm going to leave about probably 6 inches, so I'm going to take my ruler and I measure about 6 inches, so about right here. I'm going to mark it with a pin so I know where to stop. I always do 6 inches for the opening of the back, whether it's a skirt, pants, whatever it is. I like to do 6 inches. It makes enough room to get it over your hips, especially if you're a more curvy girl. You can never go wrong with a bigger gap. And you're going to sew it up at your seam allowance to the pin. Now again, if you use byhandlondon.com, this already automatically has 5/8 seam allowance built in, so you're going to want to sew up the back of your skirt using 5/8 seam allowance. So once I sewed this at 5/8 seam allowance, I went ahead and I serged it. So I serged it all the way down to where the fabrics, I stopped my seam and I ran it off my serger. Then I took it and I laid it flat, open like this, and I run this through my serger so I have it all serged and closed up. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to press this to one side. So I'm going to lay it, press it to the right side, my right side, and then we're going to press it all the way down so that this end right here is also pressed. Alright, now that this is pressed, we can do the overskirt. How we are going to do the overskirt is going to be a little different than how I did the underskirt. So we are going to be doing a French seam for the bottom of the skirt. So I marked where I will be having it open. It's going to be the same amount it was on the other skirt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do half of my seam allowance and sew up, but I'm going to not go all the way to the top. I'm going to snip this open at the seam allowance, and then I'm going to curve my seam allowance so it goes in at a point. Alright, so once you have your fabric stitched together, again, you're going to be doing your wrong sides together because we are doing a French seam. So once you have that done, you're going to take your scissors. You're going to take your scissors and right at the base where you ended the seam, you're going to snip it. Do not snip through your seam. Snip as close as you possibly can get to it though. Once you do that, you're going to cut away the excess seam allowance, and then you're going to put it right sides together. Make sure this part that is not sewn into the French seam is not inside where it's being sewn. Press it. If you want your seams and your garments to look professional and beautiful, always, always, always press your seams. Once it is pressed, you're going to sew from the bottom. You're going to sew up to where the seam stops at your point. However, you are going to gradually bring it in so that it curves to that point. You do not want to just keep going all the way across and stop. You want to curve it in to that point. You are going to start curving it in so it makes a nice curve to this point. When you get to that point, you can either back stitch or you can take it out and tie it, whatever you prefer. Alright, and just like you did the other one, you're going to press this to one side. It does not matter which side you press it to. So when you are finished with it and you pull it to this side, you should have a nice French seam with the opening still intact. So the ruffling that we'll be doing around the top skirt is done the exact same way we did the bias tape that we'll be using on the bottom skirt. So we're just going to press the seams open, then I'm going to serge both ends, and I'm going to serge the bottom of the overlaying skirt. Alright, so once you get your tape for your ruffles done, you're going, and you of course you serged your bottom of your top layer skirt as well, you're going to roll in your one side of your ruffles so you have a nice clean edge on the other side. Now if you wanted to, you could roll this twice. You don't need to, because if you serged it. Now, if you don't have a serger, you will have to finish all these seams by hand, either by pinking shears, roll hemming it, or you could, if you have an overlock stitch on your sewing machine, you could do that as well. So there are different ways you could finish it, but if you serged it, you don't need to necessarily roll it twice. You can just roll it once. Alright, so once you get your hem done on your ruffles, you are then, I gotta find the, there it is. Alright, so you're going to make the gather stitch. So typically the gather stitch is you do 2 lines. I always knot one end just so it doesn't fall out. And then I also forgot to mention that my rule of thumb for when you're making gathers is to double the amount of fabric you would have otherwise. So I measured the circumference of the top skirt, and then I doubled it. So I have about 200 inches of fabric right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the double stitch right here. Now if you do have a twin needle, you can use the twin needle. If you do not, you have to do 2 lines. Now you don't have to necessarily do 2 lines. However, when you are stitching it and gathering it, it makes things a lot easier because you'll have a nice flat surface to work with where you can sew in between. Alright, so I got my ruffles all gathered and I finished sewing it on the end over here and connected it, and then I pinned it to the over skirt. So what you're going to want to do when you're doing this, you're going to want to make sure that your ruffles are as even as possible, because obviously if they're heavier over here and lighter over here, you're going to be able to tell, and you don't want your ruffles to be uneven. It's going to look funny. I did the 2 gathering lines, so you're going to stitch in between them at your seam allowance. My seam allowance is a 1/2 inch. Once you're done stitching all the way around at your seam allowance, you are going to stitch top stitch around this side to make sure you keep your gathers going up, because you don't want them flipping back like this and your gathering is they're facing the wrong direction on your skirt. So as you can see, I'm sewing in between my stitching right here. The 1/2 inch mark on your sewing machine will be the tick mark right after 5/8 of an inch. So you're going to just line it up right at that tick mark if your seam allowance again is at 1/2 inch, and you're going to sew right in between where your gathering is. Alright, so I just finished attaching the ruffles, so if I put them up, they're all done. So I got a bunch of threads, and of course I need to take out the stitch right here that's going to be showing, but we are going to stitch it down first. So you're going to take your fabric and you're just going to flip it so it's the right side and lay it down. So it's going to look like this. You're going to see your ruffles. And then all you're going to do, you're going to make sure your seam allowance is going up. So if you want to press this, you can. I recommend not pressing it just because they're ruffles, and if you accidentally press your ruffles down, they're going to look really funny, and it's going to be very hard to get them back looking like normal ruffles. So I would suggest maybe not pressing down the seam allowance, because you can feel, because it's thick enough, you can feel what direction and what side your seam allowance is on. So you're just going to stick that underneath the machine. Now what I like to do for this is I like to do an edge stitch, top stitch, whatever you want to call it. So I just move my needle over just like that. So I have it lined up in the middle center of my foot, and then I have my needle over and I have it sewn down. It's just an easy gauge and you can't mess it up. One more thing that I do want to mention is that if you are new to sewing and you're new to doing things like this, or even if you're not new to sewing, or if you have a machine that just is troublesome when sewing thicker fabrics or thick things like this, I would suggest getting a walking foot, and I will show you what that looks like as soon as I finish this ruffles. Alright, so we have finished. So it's going to look something like this. On the outside you'll have your ruffles, and of course they'll be laying like this, so they're nice and ruffly. Now the other side of it should look like this. You're gonna have your stitch mark down here, and of course you're gonna be taking out this top stitch right here because you can see it on the other side. So don't forget to remove that. It might take a little while, I'm not gonna lie. I probably will do this later tonight, if you know what I mean. When I'm like sitting down watching TV, removing stuff, great way to kill time and not get bored. The walking foot, I mentioned it a little bit when I was showing you how to sew down the ruffles. So this is what it looks like. It looks a little goofy, yes. Every single sewing machine company has their own walking foot design. They all look generally like this. I'm not gonna lie, they all look like this. Of course, they have the different branding and everything. So if you are new to sewing, like I mentioned, even if you're not new to sewing and you have a machine that maybe just doesn't do well with thicker fabrics or a lot of thick, like the fabric is making it thick, I would still recommend getting a walking foot. I have had one of these now for probably a year and a half, and when I first got it, it was like a miracle. Like I was like, why have I never bought one of these before? They just make sewing fabric so much easier, especially if you're new to sewing. These are a game changer. You're gonna have a lot easier time working with slippery fabrics, working with bulky fabrics. It's gonna really help you to keep your fabric even and under the machine. And so I really do recommend getting a walking foot. So now that we have the overskirt done, I always hem the bottom skirt last, so I'm gonna wait to the very end of this video to hem it. If you are one of those people who just like to hem it and get out of the way, you can check out my timestamps below that I mentioned in the beginning of this video, and you can skip ahead and skip back, skip to whatever part of the video you need, whatever part of the video you are at. So that is why I put them down there, because my sewing videos, they are long, guys, and I know that. So let's get to attaching this to the underskirt, and then we will start the top. All right, so what we are going to do now is we are going to attach the skirt to the underskirt. So the first part of this is we're going to be working with the back. Because it's cut down here, we can easily attach it to the back of this. So we want the back to line up perfectly just like it does on this one. So we're going to be separating, make sure that these are separate and these are open. And you're going to just baste this outer one to this one just like this. And then we will put on over a little cap on it, and we will be sewing this part together as well. So for this part, you're going to line it up just like you did on the other one. Line it up over the seams, and then we're going to press it down just like we did on the other, just like we did here, except that this will be over it, and we're going to press it down and stitch down. Scotty, I gotta use the ironing board, babe. You can get off. Alright, so I'm going to show you right here. So this is the slit where I'll be putting the buttons on this. So this is the outer fabric. You can see this is where we did the French seam, and this is where we cut it so that it's open. And this is the other one where we pressed it to one side and have this. So now we're going to take it and we're going to line it up right in the opening right here, and we're going to pin it down here so that it will stay right here, because this is where we want it to line up. Once you have this pinned down, we will be adjusting these pins momentarily, but for now I will just leave them there. So we're going to make sure this lines up all the way to the top, and we're going to pin it down here. And I had done this to keep my thread from falling out, because I don't want it to fall out and I lose my ruching here. I didn't do this on camera. It's the same procedure I did for the ruffles. This is just on the waistband, since my outer fabric was just a little bit bigger than my waist. I wanted it to be just a little gathered. So I went ahead and I did that. So this side will be a little bit differently, done a little differently. So you will want to line it up just like you did on the other side, but we are going to fold it in on that the line we already made with the iron. We're going to fold it in. If it helps, you can go ahead and you can pin the fabric down like this, because it'll keep it in place while you're folding it. And then you're gonna fold it on the ironing seam, and you're gonna go ahead and take your iron and you're going to press it down. Now do be careful, if you do not have glass tip pins, you cannot iron over them. It could melt the pin, it could get all over your fabric. So if you do not have glass tip pins, please do not iron over your pin tops. I do have glass tip pins that I am using right now, so I can iron over top them. When you get down to the point right here, you're gonna wanna make sure that it's pulled out, and this is where you're gonna probably wanna take out these pins that you put in here for stability, so you can actually get in there a little bit better. But you're gonna wanna make sure that it's lined up and that it's folding right where it joins. So you don't want the fold to be like over top like that. You want it to be exactly where the point is. So when you close it up, you won't. So once that is done and you have it all pinned, when you fold it like this, it should lay perfectly flat, just like this. And then on this side, you'll want to do the same. Make sure that it's lined up. All right, so the finished product should look like this. So again, it's gonna look a little like a square, and so if you close it like this, this is where your buttonholes will be, and then your buttons will be on this side. And I went ahead and I just basted the two skirts together right at the waist, and we're ready to start the top. All right, so we're gonna start construction on so the most important thing that we're going to do first is we're going to take our pattern piece that we have and created, and we're going to line it up just like this, and then we're just going to mark where I have the gathers. Oh no, it's broken. That's so sad. So mark, and I think I'm going to extend the gathers a little bit to like right here. So I'm going to mark it with a pin that I moved the gathers on my pattern, and then we're going to scoot this over and we're going to mark it on this one as well. All right, so for the lining, we're going to be darting the deficit of whatever is left of this. So you're gonna have to get out your handy dandy ruler, measuring tape, measure across this, and then measure across this, and whatever amount is left when you subtract those two numbers is how big your dart needs to be. So that's 4 inches that we need to subtract off of this. So how we're going to do that, going to take your tape measure, take your chalk, draw a little line down, right down from the point. Then it's an even number, so we're going to line it up right on the 2, mark there, and mark there. And then you're just going to fold it in half, match up on the blue dots, match it up on the point, and then sew directly to your point off your fabric, and then tie it at the end. All right, so once you have your dart done, just line it up, make sure that everything fits, everything's good, nothing's out of place or where it shouldn't be. If everything looks good, you're going to take your dart and you're going to press it to one side, and then take your scissors right here, snip right along here. Do not snip through your seam. Snip as close as you can get to the seam, and then cut the dart open. and then press it again. So your dart should look something like this. It'll have the point pressed to the side, and then the rest of your dart will be pressed open. Okay, and for the straps, you're going to need a long strip of fabric. I am doing thin straps, so that you will need, if you're doing thicker straps, you can use a paper clip. Not a paper clip, you can use a safety pin, but if you're doing thin straps, you'll need a bobby pin. And what you're going to do, you're going to sew right sides together. Sew at your seam allowance, 1/4 of an inch. And then you will take your bobby pin, take a little slit, stick your bobby pin in, and then put it right side out. Once you have your strap sewn, you're going to be taking your iron and you're going to lay it flat and sew and press the seam open. Make sure the seam is falling right in the back of the strap. So you shouldn't see the seam when you flip it to this other side. Alright, once you get it all pressed, you are going to cut off the extra seam allowance. You want to try and cut as much of this extra seam allowance off as possible, but do not get too close to your seam. You don't want it to fall out. Alright, once it is all trimmed down, it should look something like this. Your seam allowance should now be smaller than your strap. So you're going to go to one end of the strap and you're going to snip it a little bit in. Take your bobby pin and insert it in through the little snip you made, and now you can turn the straps right side in. Alright, and then you can go ahead and press your seam again. It should be a lot easier to press since you already pressed it. It should want to naturally just fall right back into that place. Alright, once you have the strap done, you can start construction of the cup. So you're going to put right sides together. Your dart and the back side of your fabric should be facing out. You're going to take your strap. You're going to take your strap and you're going to insert it in like this on your point. So you want it as centered as possible on your point, and then pin down. You can pin down all the other areas as well. Once you have them all pinned down, go ahead and sew at your seam allowance all the way around. Do not close up the bottom. You don't need to close it up. You're going to be putting it in a waistband. Once you have that sewn around, you're going to want to take your scissors and you're going to snip around the edge. Do not snip through your seam, but just snip around the edge. This will make sure that your curve is nice and curvy and not wonky looking. Once you have that all snipped, go ahead and pull the strap. It'll come right side it out, and the strap will automatically make it square off, so you don't have to worry about squaring it off yourself. Once you do that, make sure all your seams is laying flat. Kind of pinch them between your fingers to get them to come out. Then iron them down and then top stitch around. Alright, so to start the waistband, what we're going to do is we're going to sew on the point that we constructed. So you are going to put right sides together and you're going to just sew at your seam allowance and reverse it back, and we will top stitch all of this later, so you don't have to worry about doing that now, but you do want to press it down. So once you have it sewn, you're going to take your scissors and you're going to cut right at that point to where you stopped and press it down. Alright, so we are going to connect the top to the belt. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to pin it down I'm going to do it on my dress form. You might do it on the floor or in a mirror on yourself, however, whatever works for you. You're going to take your chalk and you're just going to mark where it will be laying. And it's okay that it's on the right side because it's going to be in where your seam allowance is, so no one's going to see it. And then you're also, I would suggest marking right where you need to insert in the cups. Once you have that all chalked down, you are ready to take it off of your dress form, the floor, wherever you have it, and you can baste your cups to the outer lining. Alright, so we are going to attach the cups to the waistband. So how you're going to do that, you're going to line them up. Of course, you're going to do right sides together. Always do right sides together unless you're doing a French or a jean seam, which if you don't know what that is, I will put a link in the description for you to go check out those YouTube videos on what those seams are. But you want to make sure that your cups here are facing down. This is the bottom because when you fold it out, you're going to fold it up like this. So make sure they're facing down. And you also want to make sure, you know those little chalk marks I made, how far in these need to go in, the little chalk marks? Make sure you have seam allowance, so make sure you measure your seam allowance here and shrink that mark so it lines up with your seam allowance. Once you get it all done, you're going to sew all the way across. Take it out like this, woo, spread out one side, press it to one side, put it all the way down like so, and then press it down. Be careful when you're pressing your little cups here because if they're gathered like mine, it might look a little funny if they're pressed down. So make sure you're pressing your waistband and not your cups. If your cups are not gathered, by all means, press your cups. We have it all sewn, so like I said, you're going to push it to one side. It doesn't matter which side. I would suggest doing it towards the lining. It would just make it a little easier. You're going to iron it to one side. And this just makes it easier on you for when you flip it right side in. And again, try not to iron your cups as much as possible because you don't want to create a weird fold on your ruffles. Then just fold this down. All right. Once it is all pressed, you are ready to press the lining. So what I mean, we're going to press the seam allowance. So I'm going to move this up a little bit. We're going to grab my handy dandy little ruler. We're going to mark the seam allowance. Once it's marked, you're going to fold it inwards like you're going to sew it, or like the seam allowance would be sewn in, and press it down. And we are doing this because we are going to use the stitch in the ditch method, which means we will attach this part to our dress and then press it upwards and then stitch right in along the edge of it where we sewed it to stitch this part down. So let's connect our belt to our skirt and then we can hem our skirt and fix the length of our ties and we'll all be done. So I brought the skirt over so we can start attaching it. So you want to do right sides together, so your top is going to be facing down. And you're going to slide your skirt on over top. Line up your seams. So this is not sewn, so remember you have seam allowance here. So you're going to hang it off the end, and if you wanted to, you could go ahead and fold your seam allowance down and stitch it across, all the way across. Or you could do that after you sew your belt down. Whichever way works, it's fine. Why can't I ever find my pin cushion when I need it? I always like to put my pins in vertically if I can. It just makes things easier for me. Makes them easier to take out. If you need to sew over them, you can. So I recommend putting in your pins in vertically. Remember, do not sew your lining in yet. We will be doing that a little later. So make sure when you are sewing this, you don't sew your lining into it. And once you've got that pin, go ahead and sew at your seam allowance all the way around. So once you are done sewing over it, if you did sew over the triangle part, you will want to release that. I like to sew over it because it helps to keep my sewing even, you know what I mean? So once that's done and you've opened it up, you're going to flip it around. Make sure the little triangle part is out. Now you will have another line here to take out if you had a gather stitch in your skirt. That is okay. Make sure you shove all those fabrics in there. Make sure everything looks good. So once you've released the triangle part, make sure everything's lined up how you want it to look. Everything's tucked in where it needs to be tucked in. Nothing's showing that shouldn't be showing. And pin it down. Alright, once that is pinned down, you can flip it to the other side. Once you flipped it to the other side, you're going to take your lining and you're going to line it up right below or right above where your stitch line is. At this point, if you have not closed up your waistband, you will want to close it up because we will be putting buttons on this, and of course you will need to close up your waistband. If it makes it easier, you can also turn it inside out if you are struggling to do this while it's right side out. Make sure everything looks a-okay on the other side as well. Once you've had it all pinned, you can sew right at the edge of the white fabric, or you can do stitch in the ditch and stitch right on the end without actually going onto the waistband. Alright, so I'm just going to show you real quick how I did this. So I ended up doing the stitch in the ditch method, sewing right in the ditch of the belt, and then I did not sew over the point here. If you want to sew over the point, if you're okay with how that looks, go ahead, you can. However, I wanted it to be a little free moving, so I hand stitched it down in the ditch right here. So all I need to do is take out this seam right here and then hem it and hem the bottom skirt. So yeah, and then of course I need to finish these right here, which we will do after we hem the dress. So let's get to that. So you're going to find the bottom of your skirt and you're going to take your little bias tape strip here. Leave a little at the end so you can connect it, of course, and finish it off. Leave a little tail. So you're just going to lay it down and pin all the way around the bottom of your skirt. Sorry. You want to make sure that when you do this, you also are laying down the side that is not serged. Alright, once you get to the end, you're going to take the fabric here. You're going to roll it underneath. Actually, you're going to roll it on top, sorry. Do the same with this fabric, roll it on top. Cut off the extra. And then pin it down. Just like that. Alright, now go ahead and at your seam allowance, sew all the way around, and then we will start the last step. Alright, once you have that done, go ahead and just like we've done with the other, you're going to take your iron and you're going to press this one up. So take it, press it up. Once you've done pressing it up, take this and press it like this, because we're going to sew right along here to close it up and to finish the seam. So I do want to interrupt real quick and say that A nice way, easy way to kind of help you if you're just starting out and the first time you've ever done this is you can actually snip just a little bit around here just so it's a little easier to move it. You don't actually need to do that for this technique just because of the bias tape that we're using. But if you've never done this before and you want to, you can do that. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to finish pressing my bias tape upwards. And then we're going to stitch her down. Alright, literally the easiest, prettiest hem maybe ever on the planet. It just always looks so beautiful thread. And just so clean and neat. So now the last thing we need to do is put the buttons on the back. Alright, so the last step is to put on your buttons. So these buttons I'm so excited because these buttons are going to be so cute. Let me zoom in real quick. Alright, so what you're going to need to do now is, of course, you're going to measure where you want your button holes. Alright, so you're going to need a ruler and a piece of chalk. So what we're just going to do, we're going to measure how long it is. So my gap is 8.5. So what I want to do is I'm going to divide 8.5 by 6 because I have 6 buttons. So we're going to take my little handy dandy calculator and we're going to do 6, we're going to do, what was it, 8.5 divided by 6. So about an inch and a half in between each one. So we're going to do an inch. So I want my top button a 1/2 inch from the top. So we're going to mark that, then we're going to do an inch. We're going to do 1 1/4 all the way down. 1 1/4. 1 1/4. 1 1/4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, perfect. All right, so what we're gonna do before we put on and sew on our buttons, by the way, these are like the cutest buttons ever. Not my original plan. I was originally going to use cover buttons, but I could not find my little cover button machine, so I went and bought these buttons. But look how adorable they are. They're like this pink metallic, so cute. And I think they'll go super cute with my dress. So we're going to put on the buttonholes first. So we are going to get out our buttonhole foot, and I will show you how to use your buttonhole foot and what it looks like. Okay, this is what a button foot looks like. I know it looks super goofy, but I promise you it's way better than doing a buttonhole by hand. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna slide open the little button holder right here and put in your button. This is gonna tell you how big your buttonhole needs to be. So then there's a black lever, and let me angle this so you can see it better. Alright, and there's a black lever right in the back. You can see where my finger is. It's right here. There's always going to be a lever here on your sewing machine, and it will release your foot. Some sewing machine feet, they do have you unscrew it, but most of the time they're little press-ins. So then all you do is you put your foot down, and then voila. So you also need to remember to put down your buttonhole lever. So there's a little lever in the back right here. It's going to look like this most of the time. And it goes in between the notches. So the front notch and the back notch you created, make sure you put it in between there, otherwise the buttonhole foot won't go. Alright, so I did a little practice one so I could show you what the buttonhole looks like that I'm using. Let's see if I can focus it. There it goes. Okay, so this is the buttonhole that I will be using. It's just a standard normal buttonhole. My machine starts from the bottom. Some machines start from the top, but mine starts from the bottom and goes up. So before you do your buttonhole, make sure you know which direction your machine is going to go, whether it's going to go from the down up or the up down, because otherwise you might ruin your project. Or it might just take a really long time to get this stitch out. I'm going to flip my garment around so that I can start from the notches. So I always put the notch right in the middle of the foot here. So my notch is not in the middle right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my chalk again. So we're going to take a measuring tool, and I want to, let's see, I want to do my buttonhole. I want it right in the center here. So it's about half of, so it's like this and then half of this. So I'm going to take my handy dandy little chalk, and on each one of my notches here, angle it down some more. And on each one of my notches, we're going to mark where I need to put it in the middle of my foot. And if you're using chalk, is probably the best way to go for this because you can easily remove it. If you use disappearing ink pens, that'll work as well. But you want to make sure that you can remove the marks easily. We're going to slide it into place. Make sure you can see what you're doing on the other side. Make sure you can see the blue mark. So I always recommend whenever you're doing buttonholes like this, I always recommend to just tap the foot to let the needle go down so you can see where exactly the placement is. And if you like the placement, take out your, if you like the placement, of course, just keep going. But if you don't, take your fabric out, grab a scrap piece of fabric and let it finish, because you cannot restart a buttonhole. Once you start that presser foot, the buttonhole is going to finish no matter what. So if you were like halfway between a buttonhole and you stopped, pulled your fabric out, and then wanted to restart, it won't restart, it'll just start from where it left off. So make sure you always check and you're very sure of where you want your buttonholes. Are done, you are going to want to cut off the extra threads, and I will show you how to open up your buttonhole. Alright, so the easiest, and I mean the easiest way to rip open a buttonhole is to take a pin, one of your pins, and you're going to insert it right at the end of your buttonhole, just like this, how I have these two. And you're going to take your handy dandy little seam ripper, and you're going to place it at the opposite end, poke through your fabric, and tear it up, just like that. So I'll show you again, your pin, insert seam ripper. Remember to try and only cut in between the buttonhole, pull up. When you get to the end, your pin is going to stop you from going any further, so no risk of ruining your buttonhole. Alright, to attach your buttons, you will need, of course, your hand sewing needles and thread. So this is wax coated thread. Highly recommend getting some, guys. I got this from wawalk.com. I will put it in the description for you to find it. But it's wax coated so it doesn't tangle, which is really, really nice if you're, sewing. So let's get attaching this button. And this is really strong thread as well, guys. Let me see if I can get the camera to focus in. Come on. There it goes. This is really strong thread as well, guys, so you don't really need to double it up if you don't want to. I always double up my thread when I'm sewing. Alright, and I always double up my thread just because I'm paranoid that it's going to fall apart, even though I know it's probably not going to. So as you can see here, I already sewn on a couple of the buttons, but I'm going to show you how to sew one on. And I think, and these buttons of course are this kind of button, so it has the little thing. Let's see if it'll focus. There it goes. Oop. Come on, you can do it. Has one of these little hoops in the back, so you're going to obviously attach these buttons differently than regular buttons, but I will show you how I attach these buttons. So I put my needle through the little hoop to start, pull it almost all the way through, and then just loop it so the button just kind of wants to hang there. And then I will find where I put my blue marks you can see here, and I'm going to just make a little incision. And I'm trying not to go all, I'm trying to just slightly touch the back sides. You really want to try and keep your button stitches right in the same spot. And then I'm just going to go through, pull it nice and tight, and then I will repeat this a few times. So 1, Alright, so once I've done that a few times, what you're going to do now, you're going to take your needle and you're going to stick it through all your stitching like this. Let me see if I can zoom in a little better. So you're going to stick it through all your threading, pull it, and then you're going to loop it back, and you're going to do this 2 or 3 times. Alright, and then you can cut it off and do the rest of the buttons. Ugh, I'm going to be a hunchback by the time I'm 30. Anybody else in the sewing community relate? You're always like bent over. And I already have like slight scoliosis, so I'm just doomed. I need a chiropractor, guys. Anybody else need a chiropractor? Alright. Alright, so we are all done with the buttons. Let me cut away some of these extra loose threads. Alright, so my dress form is actually just a little bigger than I am, so I don't think I'll be able to close it all the way. So I will take this off the dress form to show you the buttons. Or let me see if I can close the bottom buttons. I might be able to. Alright, so these are the buttons that I was able to button up because, again, my dress form is actually just a little bit bigger than I am. It used to be my size, but I shrunk a little bit, so instead of the freshman 15, I got the, I don't know, the freshman weight loss 13, I don't know. Anyway, or it's 15, isn't it? Never mind. So these are the buttons. They look super cute. I'm super happy with them. So let me zoom out so you can see the whole dress, and then I will try it on for you guys. All right, and here is the finished dress. Guys, I'm not joking. I am so proud. I think this is the best tailored dress I've done at this point. I've really set a standard, guys. I've been really working on my tailoring lately because I look at things and I'm like, I need to do better. So I'm really proud of my tailoring. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I will try it on in a second. So let's do that for you guys. Alright, so this is what the finished product looks like. I am so happy with it, guys. I feel so pretty in this. I think it's so cute. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you follow my social media. I'll be posting pictures, of course. If you followed along with this video and you made a dress like mine, please tag me in the photos. I want to see your rendition, your interpretation of this design. Please tag me so I can see it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more sewing, fashion design content, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Look how cute it is. Look at the back. Look at the back. Oh, the buttons. Everything is just, oh my God. I'm in love. I'm never gonna take this dress off.